happened to you that no one believes actually happened. Story 1. I had a job interview in a town I never been in before, got lost and decided to park the car and walked up to a random stranger, some old man I never seen before, asked him where I can find name of business. He politely tells me where to find it, and then says, "You're welcome, my first name and last name." I never told him my first and last name, just asked for directions. I was dumbfounded, and he just chuckles and walks off into some store. I think back to it every so often. I have an uncommon name, there's no way you can even guess it. Story 2. I walked in on my cat peeing in the toilet. I walked in. My cat stopped for a second as we stared at each other in disbelief. My cat finished peeing then ran out. Story 3. I was walking around my wooded driveway when I saw a young owl sitting on the ground. The next thing I know I feel a sharp pain on the top of my head and look up to see a mama owl swoop off. No one believes me when I tell them I was attacked by an owl. Story 4. I went to my first festival in 1991, watched the opener at 10 a.m. with 100 other mostly uninterested people, and did not think too much of it. Half a year later, the band was all over the hit charts, the name of the group Nirvana. Story 5. I was waiting to get the tube on the London Underground. One just pulled up but we decided it was too busy and we'd wait for the next one. There was a woman who kept staring at me, intense eye contact. She got on the crowded tube and continued to stare. She turned to face the man next to her, whose back was turned. She then licked this guy's giant afro unbeknownst to him whilst maintaining eye contact with me. The doors closed and the tube went away. People think it's too random to be true. The memory is burnt into my brain. Story 6. I charged at a grizzly bear. I let my dog outside one night while my husband was at work. The house we used to rent didn't have lights in the backyard, so I would shine a flashlight through the living room windows into the yard when he went out. I was standing there watching my dog and he suddenly stopped and was staring at something. I whipped the flashlight in the direction he was looking, and less than 10 feet from him was a grizzly bear staring down my dog, with only a flimsy chicken wire fence between them. My mind quickly flashed to our safe upstairs and I knew I didn't have enough time to get up there. So I ran outside towards the bear like a bridge troll, stomping, waving my arms to look big, blinding the bear with a flashlight, and yelled in the deepest and loudest voice I could muster, "Go away, bear, leave him alone, get out of here." The bear was shook and just darted off into the darkness. I ran down to my dog and swooped his up and threw him inside and locked the door. In the same month, someone else in town had their dog killed by a bear when they let them outside at night. I've stopped telling people this story because no one believes I would actually charge at a bear or they think I'm insane, but I love my dog. Edit. This was indeed a brown bear and not a black bear. I used to live on Kodiak Island and it only has Kodiak brown bears, no black bears. I used grizzly because I was trying to not to point out where I used to live, but with the naysayers figured I'd share the location. Story 7. This is going to sound a bit weird, and it's hard to explain, but basically it goes like this. One time as a kid I was standing by the edge of a cliff over my dad's garage, had been climbing it with a friend. It was pretty slippery at the edge and because of that I accidentally slipped and fell. It was probably 6 to 7 meters down to the ground. At the ground there was this singular plank that had been placed to rest between two tables. I literally fell down 5 to 6 meters, landed with my butt on the plank and bounced down on the ground feet first. It didn't hurt one bit. I don't know how I got so lucky. Story 8. I fully admit how stupid this was, but I was swimming by myself in the Gulf in fairly clear water about 10 to 15 feet deep. My parents and sister were on the beach watching me. With how clear and calm the water was, I'd occasionally go under, blow out all my air, and sit on the sandy bottom. I can open my eyes in short intervals in salt water, so I'd look around a bit once I settled on the bottom. During one of these drops to the bottom, I bumped into something and a giant, dark blob took up nearly my entire field of vision when I opened my eyes. At first, I thought it was an alligator and I was a goner, but it turned out to be an equally startled manatee. I had no idea they could swim that fast. Most people don't believe me, but it was one of the most surreal experiences I've ever had. Edit. What was stupid is that I was about 200 to 300 yards from shore, and there was no one within 100 yards of me in the water. I'm a strong swimmer, but it's never a good idea to be isolated to that degree while swimming in the ocean even on a calm day. Story 9. I nearly drowned on the 4th of July when I was 16. Parents, aunts and uncles were around the pool and didn't see anything and insisted it didn't happen because they would have seen it. I agreed to swim with my younger cousins. They were ecstatic that a big kid agreed to swim with them. I jump in and they immediately all dogpile on top of me. They're pushing me down in their excitement and I'm trying to get to the surface. I remember blacking out for a second and then thinking, I'm not dying in a swimming pool. I did the only thing I could think of at the time. I went against my instincts and dove deeper into the deep end and eventually got out from underneath my cousins and pulled myself out of the pool. Story 10. My dad picked me up and we went about 20 miles out to the countryside. He was visiting a friend who had a river run through his property. Dad wanted to talk to the guy about fishing. The guy also had a little shop selling knickknacks and ornaments. My dad is one of the stingiest people alive. He never buys anything. I begged him to let me choose a gift. He allowed me just one. I chose a small bluish Viking statue. It was half a set, but I definitely wasn't allowed to buy the woman Viking. Just one. When I got home, my mum said she had went for a drive that day with her partner, stopped at a tiny gift shop and bought a woman Viking statue. The other half of the set. Story 11. When I was 15 years old I was doing some babysitting for my parents' friends for pocket money. I was babysitting this little girl one night. We were watching some kids movie in the living room. This little girl was full of energy, so she was jumping on the couch during the movie. I thought it would be better to let her spend her energy now so bedtime would be easier, so I sat next to her during the movie just in case she stumbled or fell. Everything was going fine until the moment I decided to get up to go to the bathroom. It kinda double jumped her trampoline style when I shifted my weight, so she got much more air this time. The thing is, this couch was right next to a staircase going into the basement. The railing was just behind us, leading to a 15 to 20 feet drop right to the bottom of the basement stairs. She got thrown right over the railing head first into the drop. I threw myself at her and caught her ankle at the last second. I pulled her back into the couch and sat her down. Asking her if she was okay, she just smiled at me and continued to watch the movie, seemingly unfazed by the fact that she almost died. In all honesty, she probably didn't realize the danger she was in that moment. Sometimes I still think about what would have happened if I hadn't catch her. Story 12. 20 years ago in my mid-20s, a friend asked me to spend Thanksgiving with her in Laughlin, Nevada because she had no one else to hang out with. Single guy with no other plans, I made the long drive there. She's just a friend, nothing romantic. Late one night, I'm a total amateur at the craps table and start rolling dice with a really cute girl. Way out of my league, lots of drinks, winning big, just a great time. She really knew what she was doing, placing bets I've never even heard of. One thing leads to another, and I end up back at her room. The next morning we're having breakfast and she shows me her pics and magazine. We said our goodbyes and I've never seen her again. Only one night stand I've ever had in my life. Yep, just your average ordinary looking guy that slept with a playmate. I only told a few people, but they didn't believe me, so I decided to mostly keep it to myself. I don't blame anyone for not believing because it sounds like the most made-up ego-boosting guy story ever, but I did end up finding the magazine with her pics, and yes, for a mid-20s guy it did boost my ego. Story 13. When I was at uni, staying in halls of residence, I was putting a CD back in its case when I dropped it. The CD landed, not on the top, not on the shiny bottom, but on its side, then continued to roll towards the open door, whereupon it took a sharp right, and continued in a perfectly straight line 40 foot down the corridor, where it finally ended shiny side down, in a pool of 6 someone had chundered up the night before. Story 14. Went camping last year, woke up to something pressing in on the tent down by my feet, watched as the pressing in shook the whole side of the tent and moved up from my feet to my hip. That's when I realized that whatever was pushing in on me was a human hand, could clearly see the fingers outlined. Immediately took stock of everyone in my tent, all present and accounted for, jumped up out of my cot. I was the only one who saw it, everyone else told me to go back to bed. It was just a deer or something. Spent a good hour trying to convince myself I hadn't seen a hand. Story 15. I swear that I was on a boat and saw a giant ray stingrays were around. Although it looked bigger launch itself out of the water, flip and go back down, it then did it again, as the person who saw it with me and I shouted, everyone else came over, and it never happened again, and I can't find a YouTube of this behavior. I swear this happened, and it pisses me off I don't have proof. Story 16. Christmas house. Must have been 2005 or 2006, after Katrina, in Biloxi. I was shopping at a thrift store with my 3 little ones and we went to a Chinese place after. This kindly couple was talking to us and they told us about their neighbor's house and how they decorated it inside and out for Christmas. I got the address and directions from them and set off. We found the house lit up and parked and were greeted by an older man outside who said give him a minute to see if Santa were home. We waited out on the porch and Mrs. Claus came and got us. My older children 4 and 2 were given candy canes and we were given a tour of the house. Every room had a theme and multiple Christmas trees. There were dolls and trains and decorations in every square inch of the massive place. They must have spent thousands. I didn't have a camera with me that day and our phones didn't have a camera back then, so I have no proof it happened except for the hazy memories of my oldest. My hubby thought I had lost my mind when I got home and told him. Story 17. I was meeting some friends for dinner after work one night. We agreed to meet at a specific time and as I was leaving work, made note of the time. I knew I would be arriving late because of my regular commute time, which was around half an hour. I take my usual route to their place, which is a straight shot. 20 minutes go by, I should almost be there, when I noticed the road was looking a little unfamiliar. I tried reading street signs and decided to take the next turn I came across. I follow the road an extra 10 minutes and end up on a main road, the same road that leads from my work to my friend's place, that I thought I was on. From where I was my commute time was around 20 minutes. I did not make any turns while I was driving. Have no idea how I ended up there. My friends were convinced I probably just drove on autopilot or fell asleep at the wheel. Story 18. I was walking briskly to work, running late. Out of nowhere I felt the urge to pick a clover along the sidewalk. It was overflowing with cool fluffy clovers. The split second I started to bend over to swoop down mid-walk. I knew beforehand I was somehow going to pick a 4-leaf clover and I did. I can't explain it. Story 19. When I was young I had hot oil spilled over the whole right-hand side of my body. Burned the out of me. Was blind in one eye. Covered in patches for weeks. One day my mum took me into the hospital to get my dressings changed and the doctor told her I would likely have to have plastic surgery and skin grafts as it wasn't healing. Go to change my dressings and there's not a mark on me. Completely healed, eyesight normal. No one believes the story so I just don't tell it anymore. Story 20. There was a toy pig an old couple gave to me and my roommates. Sometimes we would throw it at each other. One day it disappeared. I knew we'd thrown it in the corner of my bedroom but it was gone. A few days later, we found it on the top shelf in the kitchen. I'm the only one who can reach that high. Over the next month or two that toy pig would keep disappearing and reappearing in random places. We all blamed it on each other until one day it disappeared in the front room again. Me and my friends all went to the store. When we came back it was on the sidewalk in front of our house. After I left, one of my roommates threw it away because he thought it was haunted. Story 21. I almost died at the skating rink when I was 9. I was having an asthma attack and didn't have my inhaler. No one cared and I had to fight to breathe. Stay alert. People still think that's just a random dramatic story I made up, exaggerated on. It's not. People are just, I've never felt so alone in a room full of people. This is why you can't trust anyone to ever help you. I was just stared at the whole time one woman was eating and watching me like it was a show. She was a mother too, yeah. Story 22. Saw a random Norwegian YT vid at 13 years old, around 200 to 300 views. 14 years old, met the guy from the vid in a MW2 lobby on Xbox. Befriended him and played with him for a while. 17 years old, was at a Metallica concert and heard an oddly familiar voice behind me. Same dude. Met him randomly at another concert at 19. Edit. I am 28 now. We've had no contact for the past 9 years, but I will probably see him somewhere else. Story 23. I was about 12. Fell asleep on a road trip for a while. Before waking up I was dreaming we were going into a rest stop that had a nice pond area for walking and a vending machine that had Fruitopia. Woke up, but we were still driving, but my dad declared he's taking the next exit. 10 minutes later it was the exact exit in my dream. Story 24. I was chillin' in a windowless room with my aunt's dog when the shadow of a man with a beer belly walks slowly across the wall 3 to 4 feet away from me towards the door and vanishes. I know I wasn't crazy because the dog's head was following it too. I refused to go back to my aunt's house. She said that it's normal and that it's her deceased relatives coming to say hi every now and then. Story 25. I don't expect anyone to believe me as I didn't even believe it myself as it was taking place. I was at a Target about 4 years ago. This Target has 3 parking lot floors and 3 floors inside the Target of the main ground floor, the middle floor and the roof floor. I had parked my car on the second floor right next to a blue Subaru Forester. I went inside and did a little shopping for a couple things we needed at home. I finish paying and I take the elevator to the second floor. I get to the spot where I parked and my car isn't there. Instead there is a white Mini Cooper, though the blue Subaru Forester I had parked next to was still there. Right next to parking space I clearly remember parking in. I start thinking to myself for a few seconds and I decide to take the stairs to the third floor because maybe I did park on the third floor, but perhaps I misread the sign. I look around and I don't see my car anywhere. I go back to the stairs and I walk down with my 2 bags back to the second floor because I could have sworn I parked right there. At this point I don't know if I'm either losing my mind or if my car had gotten stolen. I look around again to where the blue Forester was, and there it was, my red Sentra parked right where I left it. I honestly have no answers as to what could have happened, but to this day I make sure I park on the ground level as close to other cars as possible to prevent my car from vanishing or me entering different dimensions. None of my relatives believe me, and I'm too afraid to tell my friends about this because they'll think I'm really starting to go cuckoo. Story 26. Had a dream that someone was throwing rocks from a building and one hit me on the head and killed me. The following day, I went to work and decided to see if there was a shortcut. To be crystal clear, I had never been the direction I had now taken. Completely missed a sign saying a road was closed. Went round a corner and rocks were being thrown from a rooftop. I looked up and saw one coming straight for me. Got out of there pronto. What the actual, have never forgot it. Story 27. I had a guy me in a club bathroom. I reacted pretty defensively to this, and pushed him off me, and he hit the wall. I got asked to leave the bar, and no matter what I said it wasn't listened to or cared about. My friends left with me but never really believed I was touched. He waved at me and winked on the way out. I'm still furious about this. Story 28. My dog was put down in summer 2020. I fell into a deep depression and couldn't get out, getting baked every day and having a minimum 3 tall cans after work, alone. In February 2021, I had a 3-hour-long phone call with an old friend. We spent a lot of time catching up and I opened up about the loss of my dog. He too had put his dog down a couple years earlier, so we both started gushing about the pain of processing the grief. At one point I gave an analogy. What I said was, I just feel empty, like nothing matters. I could be walking down the street, see Bill and not even stop to pick it up. My friend agreed. The phone call went on for a little while longer until he had to take his kids out to get some food. That same evening I went grocery shopping. While I was in the grocery store I started to feel heavy in my chest. My heart rate started to speed up and I had to do some deep breathing under my mask to avoid a panic attack. Once I calmed down, I finished my grocery shopping then started walking home. I'd always walk the same way but this time I had to pee. I walked to the opposite end of the parking lot to take it behind a snowbank. After I was done, I decided to keep walking in that direction to make my way home. While on that walk I spotted Bill on the sidewalk. I was shocked. I immediately thought of my conversation earlier that day, so I picked it up, snapped a pic and sent it to my friend with a caption that said, "Look what I found." My friend replied in disbelief. I took that 5 bill as a sign from my dog, as a message from him telling me to move on. I went home that night and bawled my eyes out until the next day. No, my depression wasn't magically gone, but it was a big turning point. I re-entered therapy next month, left my dead-end job a couple months later, entered a new relationship in the fall after being single for 5 years and moved into a better apartment at the end of 2021. I've told the story to some people and pretty much everyone thinks I'm exaggerating. When I was 5 years old, I went with my dad, my uncle, and my granddad on a camping trip at Cades Cove. One morning, the family at the neighboring tent lot to ours left out their breakfast on the picnic table and went on a hike, so a bear came by, jumped on the table and started eating it. I, being 5, tried to go and pet the bear until my dad grabbed me, got like 10 feet from it. Eventually someone came and chased it off, I don't remember who, and the bear jumped off the side of a cliff and rode down the side of the mountain like a slide. Bonus story: on that same trip on another nearby tent lot was a group of deaf people. I had learned a few basic signs somewhere, I don't recall where, and one of them was the word friends, and while we were eating and talking about it and I did the sign, one of them came by our lot, handed me a small rubber ball like you would get out of a quarter dispenser, nodded, then walked away. It was covered in mud like he had dug it out from the ground somewhere. Never saw them again. That was a lot of writing for something that's going to get buried in this thread. Story 29 shat on me 5 times in one day at different locations. I swear it's the same that did it. I saved a litter of newborn kittens after they were abandoned in some bushes near my house. One of them was crying much more loudly than the others, and after some digging through the prickly brush, I saw that one of them was clinging to a twig for dear life. The other kittens were on the ground just moping around, but this little one was almost dangling because its umbilical cord was wrapped around the twig and it was stuck. I had to do some emergency surgery, but I eventually got it down and I saved them all. To this day, the descendants of that litter still roam the neighborhood as wild cats, and my own kitties are friends with them. Story 30 in late 2006, I was somewhat close to O'Hare, and I saw 2 commercial airliners almost collide midair. They were so close that I braced myself in my car for impact. I know what I saw. Story 31 when I was a kid, I heard my mother calling me from behind in a nearby alley me while out in public. Why is this important? Because my mom was walking ahead of me at that point and wasn't talking to anyone. Naturally, I hurried up to go catch up to her. Even now, I still don't know what that was. Story 32 when I was a kid, my family would watch the lottery drawing after the nightly news. It was the Texas lottery then. I remember sitting there, and for some reason I started just saying numbers, trying to guess what they were going to be before they called them out. I guessed all the numbers correctly before they were called out. My family was freaked out that I did that but laughed about it, joking that I'm picking numbers for their tickets from now on. I recalled the story at a family get-together years later, and none of them remember that moment. I remember it. Story 33 one time when I was maybe 10, I woke up in the morning before everyone else in my family and went out into the living room. From the living room I could see my younger brother, my only sibling, sitting at the dining room table with his back to me, and it looked like he was drawing or coloring on a piece of paper. I asked him something to effect of "Good morning, what are you doing?" and he just kept drawing with his back to me. For a split second I walked past a part of wall more like a column that was in between the dining room area and kitchen. In the short moment that I passed the column and looked at him again from the other side, he was gone. The paper and crayons were still there. I paused for a moment, like said his name out loud questioningly, then got spooked and ran to my parents' bedroom. They were both completely asleep and my brother was fast asleep next to them. Had a nightmare and slept with them that night, which would happen every so often. The way the house was set up, it wouldn't really have been feasible for him to slip past me and then quickly pretend to be asleep in my parents' room. My parents have never really believed me or thought it was part of a dream, and my brother swears to this day he wasn't in the dining room that morning. Story 34 when we were kids, we were at my uncle's vacation home. I was about 6 at the time. Anyway, I was in the swimming pool, on an inflatable boat with floaters around my arms, playing. At some point I was like, I don't need the floaters anymore, so I removed them. So I'm playing in the boat and then it flips over and I fall into the water, underneath the boat so nobody can really see me. I wasn't drowning because for some reasons, my dad teach me never to be afraid of water, and if something like this happened, I should take the air I can, empty my lungs underwater, so I touch the bottom of the pool, push up and get more air until I can reach the edge. So here I am, not drowning. So what were the adult doing right? Well, my younger brother, 4 years old, long beautiful curly blonde hair, is having a story of his own. He found a lighter on a table, play with it, and at some point, his hair caught on fire. In panic my uncle grabs him and because he was next to the pool, throw him in the water and jump to pick him up. When he got out of the water with my brother in his arms, my mom asked where's Mike. He turned around and apparently, saw the boat flipped, and every couple of seconds, my head was bumping into it, so he knew where his was. Nobody believes this story, and it's my favorite uncle memory. I'm emotional every time I tell this story because he wasn't the kindest and ended up tragically. I missed a lot these last 15 years, and maybe my brother and I wouldn't be there without him. Story 35 This is excluding my RL friends and family, but I am a civilian victim of WW280 disability. Long story short, 12 years old me finds an aluminum box in a lake, tries opening it on the spot, edge is welded but rattles inside, fails at opening it, takes it home and forgets about it until I am 14, being smarter I use a hammer instead of a rock. Explodes. What was it? Bomb technician opinion. Bored Germans loved making explosive traps in my country, so they hid a bomb in a box and rigged it to explode if opened. Or extra charge for Bunker Buster's prototype tank shell. It was 100 German plastic explosive and from WW2, but due to the tiny shrapnel they couldn't say for certain what it was. Story 36 I got lost in space. I was driving with a friend to another friend's house. We had drive there several times at night, but this one time something really weird happened. We were very aware of the area as my friend's house was by the beach besides a road with palm trees at the sides and always takes us about 20 minutes to get there. There were no alcohol or drugs involved. Suddenly we reached a roundabout we never seen before. We were really confused because, as I said, we were very aware of the road. We drove a few more minutes before turning back, and after 45 minutes we were getting kind of scared because the lack of lights or houses. We saw our friend's house. We arrived all freaked out about what happened, and to this day we have no explanation. A few days later we drove again and everything went okay. We made the regular 20 minutes. P.S.
Sorry for my English. Greeting from Emiko.
Story 37. When I was 15, I had a kitten I named Storm. She was a rescue. I cared for her, but after a month or so, she fell ill. I later learned that it was FPV. We were poor and had no money for a vet. I nursed her back to health in the best way I could, but after 3 days, her health collapsed. I knew she was dying, and I stayed by her side, whispering it's okay repeatedly. She then started seizing and her neck breaking. I was hugging her when I felt her twitch for one last time. I cried and cried. I was screaming. My dad tried to calm me down, but he eventually let me be, saying that he'll be in the other room if I need him. I don't know how long I wailed and screamed and cried while hugging my lifeless cat. Emotions started to mix in my head, all the could-have-beens, the what-ifs, the regrets, and then nothing. I'm not sure if I passed out or what, but there was nothingness, and then I woke up in my bed. It was morning. My mom was preparing breakfast and greeted me cheerfully. I wasn't in the mood for it. I asked, "Where's Storm?" She said again cheerfully, "She's just there." At this point I was almost annoyed and insulted. My cat died and I passed out crying over it, and Mom is all giddy, and I was about to lose it when suddenly, Storm appeared meowing. She brushed against my leg. Eventually I learned it was Saturday. Again, the coming Sunday was when Storm started showing symptoms. I told my parents this, how Storm eventually died, and how I went back, and they did not believe me. Eventually, Storm did fall sick, like how it happened, except this time, I did my best to have her brought to the vet. I borrowed money from my uncle and Storm was given proper care. She survived the day she was supposed to die. She got better, however. A week after her supposed death day, she fell ill again. This time, it was so fast. In less than 24 hours, she died in my arms again, the same way I first lost her. I tried my best to make what happened happen again, but I never got back again. To this day I've only told my wife this. Story 38. I done a 12-inch, all one piece. I thought that my intestine was going to come out with it. I showed my girlfriend. She was impressed, but disgusted at the same time. Me and her are the only two that seen it, but nobody would believe me if I told them. Story 39. When I was a first grader, the principal let me walk to my grandparents' house because it was 7 p.m. and no one had come for me. My mom isn't the brightest bulb, and when she couldn't find me at the kindergarten doors like before, she went to my grandparents to look for me. I walked there, but she went back to the school by the time I got there. No one home, so I walked about 6 kilometers to get to our apartment complex. No one home again, so I decided I know the way to Mom's workplace. Walked 15 kilometers to the mall complex. My mom worked as a dental assistant. On the way, a car flipped over after getting struck at full speed. White sedan ran a red at 80 kilometers, and struck a minivan, and the car flipped right in front of me, and hit the traffic light while I was crossing. Shrugged, got to the workplace. It's closed. My friend happens to be there. He's from a town about 100 kilometers away because his mom happened to have business in the area. She's a realtor. His mom comes out, obvious what the moment, and she uses an early cell phone to call the landline at my grandmother's where she happens to finally be again. Had an Amber Alert out for me, and apparently am the reason the elementary schools in my area don't let kids out for any reason until a guardian picks them up. Now, I am now employed by that school board as a teacher. Story 40. In the summer of 1987, I was in a bar in a little village in New York outside the gates of West Point. It was the middle of the week and it was just me and the bartender. Willie Nelson walked in, sat down on a bar stool and drank with us for a couple of hours. He was at the very height of his popularity. I had just read his autobiography a few weeks before and he was my favorite singer. I'm chatty, but I was tongue-tied that day. No one believed me afterwards. I suspect no one believes me today. Story 41. So there's this guy, let's name him M. Before I was stationed at this duty station with M, rumor mill informed me that M had filed an incident report that he had walked in front of a dish that was powered, and that he felt a wave pass through his body. Fast forward being the dicks that we were, of course jokes were made. Well, one scorcher of a day were except M. He was on leave, all working outside putting away equipment, and my memory is a little shady on the exact circumstances of the conversation, but I end up saying I felt a piece of metal pass through my body. Not even 10 minutes later SSGT checks on us and says there's a shop meeting for us to finish up. When we're all in the office we're told that M had shot himself and there was grief counseling to those that needed it, and I just look over to my coworker and am horrified. There were a few witnesses to it all, but I'm not in contact with any of them anymore, but yeah, that happened. Story 42. I've dreamt things that were happening simultaneously, multiple times. Names, locations, color of clothing, really specific. I still have no explanation. Story 43. That I hit a deer while on a run. I'm jogging down the road, look down for a second to avoid a pothole, look up and boom, Bambi was right in front of me. Luckily all he did was knock the wind out of me and a few scrapes, but it hurt. Story 44. I watched a person jump off the dam not too far from my house to their extremely likely death as me and my buddies drove by. Edit, I meant likely, not lucky.